I am standing in the shadow of one of the greatest engineering feats of the 28th century. Look at the Viant Dam. It rises 262 meters into the Italian sky, a curve-perfect concrete. Elegant, defined, and structurally flawless, is the highest double curvature arch dam in the world. This is not a one made to human frying, it's a tombstone. Behind this wall, there's no water, only a forest of silence and sorrow. In front of it lies the ghost of a town that was wiped off the face of the earth in 4 minutes. This dam withstood a force twice as powerful as the nuclear bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It failed to protect a single soul. Tonight, we peel back the layers of history to understand how ambition turned to an apocalypse. To understand the tragedy, we must travel back to the late 1950s. Italy was rising from the ashes of World War II, riding the wave of an economic miracle. The factories of Milan and Turin were hungry for energy, and the white coal hydroelectric power was the gold of the era. Enter Sade, Società Adriatica di Elettricità, a powerful monopoly acting almost like a state-run estate. Their dream was audacious, to turn the Piave River Valley into the Battery Riviera. The crown jewel of this project was the Viant Dam, and was to be a symbol of natural pride, but testimony to man's ability to tame nature. But in their rush for progress, they ignored the ground upon which they were building. They saw the geology as a mere obstacle to be overcome, not a warning to be heeded. The engineers focused on the gorge, which was solid rock, perfect for anchoring the dam, but they neglected the reservoir's flat bank, Monte Toc. In the local dialect, Toc means rotten or falling apart. The name it saw was a warning written on the maps for centuries. Geologists had identified a massive paleo landslide, a prehistoric fracture waiting to reawaken. The mountain was not sighing, it was a pile of fractured rock resting in a layer of clay. When dry, the clay hard, a Sade planned to fill the valley with water, soaking that clay, tuning it into a lubricated slide. It was like building a swimming pool next to a sleeking giant who was prone to slipping. The locals knew the mountain white, but their folk wisdom was dismissed by the men in suits with their calculations. Every tragedy has a prophet who is ignored. In this story, it was Tina Merlin, a journalist for Lunita. She was the voice of the voiceless villagers. As early as 1959, she wrote articles exposing the risks, detailing how the earth was already shifting. When surprised the truth, Sade then listened to suit her. They charged her with spreading false news and stirring the peace. In a courtroom in Milan, she was acquitted because she told the truth, but the moral victory did not stop the construction. She was labeled a communist agitator, a hysterical woman trying to halt progress. But Tina Merlin was simply looking at the cracks in the ground that the engineers refused to see. She screamed into the void, and the void stared back with indifference. 1960, the dam was completed. The filling began. As the water rose, the mountain responded. First came the groans, deep, subterranean rumbles that kept the villagers awake at night. Then, a crack appeared on the side of Monte Toc, a fracture shaped like the letter M, stretching for 2 kilometers. It was the signature of the landslide, marking its territory. Sade halted the filling, lowered the water, and the movement slowed. This gave them a false sense of control. They believed they could tame the landslide by raising and lowering the water level slowly. Like easing a heavy load down a ramp, they treated a geological capitalism as if it were a hydraulic experiment. But the mountain was not an experiment, it was a ticking bomb. And they were playing with a detonator. By late September 1963, the slide was accelerating, 1 centimeter down, then 20, then 40. The trees on the slope were walking downhill. The engineers, led by Alberico Biadin, panicked. They realized the entire side of the mountain was going to fall. But instead of evacuating Longarone, they decided to lower the water level rapidly to prevent a wave from overtopping the dam. It was a fatal miscalculation. By draining the water too fast, they removed the buoyancy that was helping to hold the slope up. They effectively pulled the brake while pressing the accelerator. They knew a collapse was imminent, but they underestimated the scale. They extended a spike. They were about to get a tsunami. Fear paralyzed them from making the only decision that mattered, sounding the alarm. October 9, 1863, it was a dew, crisp autumn evening long run. The town lane of Valley 4, unaware that was seen 262 meters above their heads. Life was mundane, getafun as simplicity. Men gathered in the cafes. It was a big night for football fans. Real Madrid was playing Glasgow Rangers on television. Families were finishing dinner. Children were being tucked into bed. Up at the dam, the workers felt the earth trembling beneath their boots. They called headquarters. The mountain was moving visibly now. But down in the valley, there was no siren, no frantic police cars, just the blue flicker of TV screens and the laughter of friends. The silence of the Aborigines sealed their fate. 10:39 p.m. The breaking point. In a matter of seconds, 260 million cubic meters of rock, an explicit chunk of the earth twice the volume of the water in the reservoir, detached from Monty Talk. It didn't just slide, it crashed. It moved at 110 kilometers per hour. Imagine a mountain falling into a bathtub. The displacement was instantaneous. The impact generated an earthquake. The water, having no way to go, was squeezed with unimaginable pressure. It didn't just rise, it exploded. 3 waves were born. One went upstream, one circled the reservoir, and the third, the deadliest, turned towards the dam. The artificial lake had become a loaded cannon, and the mountain was the gunpowder. The wave that hit the dam was 250 meters high. Let me repeat that, 250 meters. It crested the top of the dam, soaring 150 meters into the night sky above the concrete rim. But before the water came the wind. The wave pushed a pocket of air ahead of it, an atmospheric shock wave with the force of an atomic blast. This air blast hit Longarone first. It blew the clothes off people's bodies, stripped the skin from their bones, and flattened buildings before the water even touched them. Then came the water, 50 million cubic meters of liquid rock and debris, falling vertically into the valley. It wasn't a fly, it was a hammer of God dropping from the sky. The dam, incredibly, held firm. It stood unmoved while the catastrophe vaulted over its shoulders. It took 4 minutes, just 4 minutes for the water to reach the Piave riverbed, scour the valley floor, and rebound up the opposite slope. When the mist cleared, Longarone was gone, not damage, gone. There were no ruins, no rubble, no walls standing, just a flat plain of gray mud, white limestone ruts. 1.910 people were dead. Whole family lines were extinguished instantly. The immense pressure of the wave had disintegrated everything. The silence that followed was heavier than the roar of the wave. No screams, no cries for help, because there was almost no one lived the cry. The town of Longarone had been scraped off the map as it by giant trowel, leaving o'er the raw earth bleeding underneath. The sun rose on October 10th over a moonscape. American and Italian troops arrived to help. But there was little rescue to be done, only recovery. They found bodies kilometers away, stripped and broken. They found clocks stopped at 10:39. The most haunting images were not the bodies, but the objects of a life interrupted, a sewing machine twisted like wire, a pristine teacup sitting in a seed mud, a bicycle wrapped around a tree trunk. The survivors, those who were where lived high on the slopes, wandered the mud like ghosts, looking for streets that no longer existed, for houses that had turned to dust. The tragedy was so absolute that it defied comprehension. It wasn't a natural disaster, it was a man-made massacre. Year later, there are trials. Individuals were convicted, but the sentences were light. The justice hollow could go to the loss. Today, Longarone has been devoted, a marred town with a tragic soul. The dam remains. It stands here, abandoned, holding back nothing but air and ghosts. It is a masterpiece of engineering that succeeded in its design but failed in its purpose. It serves now as a brutal monument to human arrogance. As we leave this place, look at the scar on Monty Talk one last time. It reminds us that nature does not negotiate. We can build our concrete giants. We can dream our industrial dreams. But when we ignore the trembling of the earth, we do so at our own peril.